Ginta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the second reading of the Accounting Infrastructure Reform Bill. When this bill was introduced to the House, the Green Party did not vote to support it. We had significant concerns, and we said that we would be watching carefully during the Select Committee process. Our main concern, even though there were things that we initially knew that we thought were good, so, for example, requiring large charities to comply with standard audits, we thought that was quite good to bring those in line with other organizations. But generally, our concern was that this bill was part of an overall movement towards less regulation in a sector where it's absolutely critical that we do have good standards and careful regulation, particularly in the wake of the global financial crisis. I think it's absolutely critical that the citizens of New Zealand can feel confident that the people conducting audits and investors need to feel confident that the people conducting audits and financial reporting are complying to an absolute maximal standard. We have to have sound confidence. We have to have confidence in the reporting that is being done. Now, ultimately, the changes that the bill makes are minor enough that we will be supporting them. Ultimately, we are operating New Zealand's, unlike other jurisdictions in the world, New Zealand is very light on regulation. On the spectrum of regulation in this sector, we rely on self-regulation, and this bill does nothing to take us towards a more standard and centralized type of regulation, which might be beneficial. And the Green Party would like to investigate the merits of that, particularly in the wake of the global financial crisis. I think it would be worth looking at. But ultimately, that was beyond the scope of this bill. And the minor changes that are made within it, I think, move from something that they make minor improvements. So we have to support them. So the changes ultimately around definition of qualified auditor and qualified statutory accountant make sense. And it does continue this type of regulation, which is ultimately self-regulation, and it's going to be accredited bodies that are able to register people as qualified auditors and qualified statutory accountants. Obviously, there's the merger of NZICA with the Australian counterpart. We never really saw any major problems with that. All of the members of both organizations did support it. So I think it does make sense to allow for that to happen. The changes in terms of approval of overseas auditors, again, make sense. We hope that the Register of Companies will be carefully scrutinizing when they do approve overseas individuals to act as qualified auditors in New Zealand and to approve associations of accountants. And I think that's something that I guess we'll just have to keep our eye on and see how it's working once the legislation comes into force. And of course, it is entirely possible that there will need to be some changes in the future. As I said initially, we always did support the fact that the provisions regarding the Charities Act, and we think that there are some benefits to that. Ultimately, what the Green Party wants to see is a progressive economy that is going to look after people in New Zealand in the short term and in the long term. And we can't have an ideological approach that all regulation is bad. There's an important role of the state to play in rectifying market distortions, in upholding standards, and ensuring that consumers are protected, because we do not live in a world of pure and perfect information or markets. And so there is a role for the state to play in the regulating of... There's an important role for the state to play. And particularly, I think we need to be looking towards changes in these sectors that are going to allow us to meet some of the greatest challenges that we're going to be facing over the next few decades. And I just have to, even though this is, the Accounting Infrastructure Reform Bill, I think that It's absolutely essential in all areas of financial reporting that we start moving towards a more holistic type of reporting that actually looks at the impact on people and the environment, because ultimately that's what the economy is here to serve. The economy is here to serve people, and we can't have an economy if we don't have a healthy environment. And if all we look at is the dollars and cents, we're quite possibly going to miss out on changes that would actually leave us all better off in the long run. And so it's a core component of Green Party policy, economic and finance policy, that we are very careful about what we measure and what we count, and that we do start to move our economy on a more sustainable path to meet the challenge of climate change, which is incredibly urgent. And it is going to require action from all of us, all companies, all citizens, and it's the government's role to show leadership on this. And the Green Party would like to see more leadership from this government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Chris Tremaine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.